Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I'm your host, Te Tayari, and today's guest is Eric Haas. Eric is a therapist engaged in a mad quest to save the world by dissolving the barriers between our conscious minds and our primal natures. Through psychedelic-assisted therapy, breath work, movement, heat and cold meditation, nature immersion, and lots of quality time with the last remaining persistence hunters of the Kalahari, he is dedicated to healing the existential scars we tend to confuse for ourselves. In this enriching discussion, Eric shares his transformative journey, integrating profound wilderness experiences, deep self-study, and studies in psychology with his role as a father to develop his innovative therapeutic approach. We explore how his direct involvement in persistence hunting with the San people of the Kalahari, combined with his focus on bodily wisdom and psychological insights, helps dismantle barriers and foster a deep connection with our interdependent and primal selves. If you are new to the show, you might like to know that I'm a counseling psychologist with an online practice dedicated to supporting wanderers, wanderers, and edgewalkers. If you're curious about how my personalized threshold counseling could benefit you, I invite you to schedule a free insight call. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to connect, explore our alignment, and see if we might walk alongside each other during a pivotal moment in your life. To schedule your call, visit coyotecouncil.earth. For more content, including other podcast episodes and my latest essays, check the direct link in the show notes. You can also join our monthly Musings newsletter for reflections, updates, and other creative endeavors by subscribing via the Connect page on our website. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform. Your likes, comments, ratings, and shares are invaluable in supporting the growth of these heartfelt conversations and stories. Now, let us prepare for the journey ahead with a deep breath, a moment of centering, an opening of our heart, mind, body, spirit, and a warm welcoming to our wonderful guest, Eric Haas. To begin this journey, I would like to know, what is it that motivates you at this time in your life? What's really stoking your fire to show up every day and continue expanding your sense of service?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of different things. One very strong thing is my relationship with my son. One metric that I use for myself to judge if a decision is a good one or not is, it's basically, am I living a life that I would be happy to see him living? Not in like the concrete details of I want him to live in this place or have this job or anything like that, but in terms of a connection to self, of sort of I guess I strive to listen to myself, to understand myself, and to respect myself in all the decisions that I make, and sort of have a faith, which is backed up by a lot of evidence, that when I do that, I'm a better person and I'm in better relationships. And I see that as creating an example that I would be happy for him to follow. And so when I see him looking to me, that's a constant source of motivation to stay curious, to stay humble, to stay honest, and to to keep striving to live the best life I can.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And how old is your son?
He's 9 years old.
9 years old. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
almost a decade of that
yeah,
father role.
yeah.
I'm curious to know just a little bit more about that. How do
Mm,
you how do you see the way that you've changed internally,
mm,
in your orientation, not only to being father, but also toward yourself
yeah.
since he's
Yeah, I
come?
think um it's a difficult question to answer because at this point I like my only point of reference is being a father, right? So it's if you had asked me 8 years ago, I could say, okay, well, 2 years ago it was like this, and now it's like this. But after 9 years, it's I
Mm-hmm.
am a father, you know. But I can say that when I had a son, and I looked at him and I saw like I'm responsible for this being, um, for his welfare, for his care. Um, it really brought home a sense of responsibility and a sense of basically getting rid of the excuses that I had been holding on to not do the work that I knew I had to do but wasn't quite doing. Um, for my sort of inner dialogue for a long time was that you know I'm big enough, I'm tough enough, I can put up with pretty much anything. Like, my
Mm,
emotions, my needs, like those don't really exist. Like I'll just roll with the punches and you know find my way through whatever happens in life.
mm,
Um, and when I had my son, and I felt on a very deep visceral level like I don't want that for him. I want him
mm,
to listen to himself and to know what he wants and to take care of himself. And through that, it has served as a mirror, continues to serve as a mirror for reflecting back on me and the way I want to be treating myself. And so it's like through learning to care for him, I've learned to take care of myself much more deeply. Um,
yeah, sounds like it. The process has softened you, made you a bit more porous and sensitive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think maybe more capable of recognizing my sensitivity.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
that whole like independence game, it was a facade, and I think it is for most people. And
Mm,
I grew up in the States, and it's a game a lot of people like to play. And there's a whole sort of superhero fantasy there of the strong, independent individual. It's the basis of the political system and the economy, and pretty much
mm,
everything everyone does there. Um, and so it was a good story to tell myself to avoid recognizing the pain that I was feeling and the upset that I felt for various things that happened to me in my life, in my childhood. Nothing nothing extreme, by some metrics, I'd say, but enough to
mhm,
create internal movement. It took me, it required me having a son, I think, to give myself the space to recognize that I had some pain inside that I hadn't been willing to look at, and I had some wounds that I wasn't able to heal because I hadn't been willing to recognize that they existed, you know.
mm, mhm. Can I ask you to just tilt your screen down just a little bit because
Yeah, sure.
we're only getting part of your face sometimes from my.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's I can imagine. I'm not a father myself, but when
Mm,
I imagine and envision that possibility that I would love to bring to reality at some point, um, I get the sense that the processes you're describing here would be very prominent and essential,
mm,
and essential not just for our own individual life or our own family life, but
mm,
also for our greater sense of self. That our family and our deep intimate relationships, if we approach them in a certain way, they offer us the opportunity to expand our sense of self, to have a greater awareness of how we are co-arising and interdependent with our context,
Mhm.
which, of course, the greater context of the earth, we eventually come to realize is important as well. And I see in the work that you're doing, particularly in the Kalahari, um, with the San peoples down there, seems to be connected to that kind of process for you, that at some point through whatever pathways, I'd be curious to learn about them, you
Mm.
found yourself down there, and now you're you're really striving to support those people and their culture in a significant way. So your
Yeah.
sense of self has begun to weave across continents, across the world, across
Yeah.
cultures in a really beautiful way. Would you care to share the pathways that led
Yeah.
there? Some of the
Yeah.
highlights?
Maybe I can give you the like 2 minute version, and then feel free to zoom in on any part of that you want.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so through like various dynamics growing up, the lesson I learned, um, basically like my nervous system learned, was that there wasn't any space for my emotions or for my needs. My
Mm,
job was to take care of other people who were, bigger than me and older than me, and that if I were to be loved, if I were to be cared for, if I were to be worthwhile, that was the path to doing it. And I learned that lesson very well. And I want to take full ownership over, like, this is the lesson I learned. I'm not saying anyone put that on me or anyone else is,
mm,
guilty of anything. My experience, my life, that's the lesson I learned. And I took that lesson deep to heart and played it out again and again in various romantic relationships. And after X number of repetitions, stopped blaming the outside world and said, if she did that and she did that and she did that and she did that, maybe I'm doing something. And began that sort of inward quest of, okay, what is it that I'm bringing to the table? How am I participating in these dynamics that are painful and destructive, where my needs aren't being met? Um, and that kicked off now about a 15-year process of study. Before that, quite a few years of travel, different parts of the world, living in nature. I mean, I worked in a lot of different farms. I worked as a shepherd, as a logger,
mm,
like some basically like working like biological research, like just outside all day, every day in a few
mm,
different continents. And that sort of took the edge off of things enough and allowed me to connect with myself deeply enough to decide I wanted to go back to school and study more deeply. Started studying psychology in a few different places. I liked it. It was good enough, but it felt like there was some pretty severe limitations to what you can do with the conscious mind. And started digging deeper into breath work, heat, cold, uh, I mean, fasting, meditation, like, I mean, a lot of different practices.
mm,
Um, and what I came to again and again is trying to get back to like the essence of who I am, you know, stripping off the extraneous layers that have been put on me by, you know, I started the sentence in a way it's hard to finish well. It wasn't put on me by society, but that I've somehow put on myself through my interactions with society, um, and and family and whatever else, and trying to get rid of all the attachment to these patterns and thought and feeling and behavior that weren't serving me, and connect with something deeper, truer, more real. And I find that in connection with nature, Um, and so developing a personal practice through all these things, and then taking that to people who are looking for help as well, and I work often one-on-one, like a therapeutic contest talk, excuse me, in a therapeutic context, but
Mm,
also doing workshops, retreats, group setting type of stuff.
mm,
Um, and, trying to, as I continue to try and help myself and to explore and to learn and to grow, helping others as well in their processes. Um, and that to me represented a transformation of what was once a sort of compulsive need to take care of other people and ignore myself, transform that into a conscious decision to help people in a way that also helps myself. So it's not completely rejecting who I am or the patterns that I've learned, but it's working with them and sort of, you know, alchemizing them into a way that's nutritive to me as well. And so through that process, I saw like, well, I think helping people it's an essential human need, right? And what it actually came partly from wanting to give my clients a way where they can help other people. And you can say, well, go to your hometown and, volunteer at the homeless shelter. Like, yeah, that's
mm,
legitimate and that can be amazing.
mm,
But also I wanted to find a way where they could give back to what feels to me like a greater cause. And that sort of dovetailed with my own personal passion for long distance running. I mean, I live in the mountains. I run in the mountains like, I don't know, not every day, but multiple times a week. It's a huge part of my life in a way that I engage in the natural world. And I have been fascinated for a long time with the San people, the Kalahari, and particularly with the practice of persistence hunting. And it's this sort of almost has this mythological status of, it is like the apex of human engagement with the natural world. In its purest form. It's like you need to have encyclopedic knowledge of the animals and their tracks and what they all mean. At the same time, you need to be in incredibly good physical shape. You need to be communicating constantly with the people around you in a way that the animals aren't going to perceive it. It's like this very complex dance that pulls
mm,
on a lot of different human capabilities, uniquely human capabilities. And then for me, the most interesting and richest part of that is the sort of out of body experience that almost inevitably happens of I mean, I can only say spiritual connection with the prey. There's a sense in which, deductive reasoning won't get you to the animal. The tracks disappear and you need to just know, whether that's, some
mm,
sense we haven't yet identified. Maybe it's like pheromones, maybe it's luck. I don't know what it is, but the way they describe it is it's a you have a connection with the animal. You're not inside your body. You're inside the animal's body, and you just go and reunite with yourself. And there's something in that in our modern day context sounds very sort of esoteric and maybe depending on who's listening can sound great or could sound very questionable. But whether it's great or questionable, to me the most important thing is it's innate within us. It's natural and normal.
mm,
It's not some strange thing that you need to go to a monastery for 10 years to figure out. Like, it's within all of us right here, right now.
mm,
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, all of these things sort of coalesced of like, I had this deep inner drive to want to go there, looking for ways to give back to the world in a more than a one-on-one basis, and create a place where people who have a similar urge and are looking for that next step in their growth, in their sense of meaning, in their sense of purpose, can also have a place to do that. And I came across these people in the Kalahari who are still practicing persistence hunting. As far as I know, they're the last humans alive still doing it. Maybe six guys who are still doing it. And I say came across, like I spent multiple years searching,
mm,
dedicating all my free time and my savings to like going there and trying to make this happen. Um, and it's a project now that it combines these sort of basically three elements. Like, one is anyone who goes there wants to go there obviously because they want to learn, they want to grow, they're curious generally about where we come from, who we are as a species, like connecting with our deepest roots. Then there's the aspect of giving back to the people who are there, because they're in a very difficult situation and they're struggling to survive. They want to maintain their traditions, they're committed to doing it, but their land's being taken away, the animals are scarce,
mm,
the climate's changing, loggers are coming in, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's not easy. So giving them, on the one hand, some financial support so they can have some supplemental income to buy food when they need it.
mm,
But I think more important than that is going there to learn from them and valuing them, and sort of reinforcing this idea that's on the verge of extinction, that's important what they're doing. And a lot of people go there with a lot of good intentions, and they'll, give them a solar panel, and they'll give them a solar powered water pump, and, tablets to sanitize the water, and, all these things which, seen from a certain perspective might be positive, but the psychological message that it sends is your culture is useless. And if
Mm,
you want to survive in this world, you need to adopt
mm,
modern technology, which you're basically not only powerless to engage with or develop, but like you can't even access it. The only way you can get it is if some nice white person comes on and gives it to you.
yeah.
And so I think that if you
Mm,
say, like, as a man, as a father, if you accept that, that's mm, incredibly destructive.
mhm,
And that's how indigenous cultures die. Is it's like when, and I say man because I'm a man, as a woman as well, as a figure whose purpose is to care for others and to create community and to provide. If you accept that you can no longer do that, and the only way you can do it is by getting handouts from these random outsiders who you you know you have no connection with,
mhm,
that's a very sad place to be.
mm,
And so what we're trying to do is to help create alongside them a path forward that's respectful of their traditions, respectful of their culture, but in no way trying to like recover a past that we can imagine may have been one way or another. But I mean, it's impossible, right? We're living in a different time with a different context, and the question is, how can they move forward? How can they create a system that works for them, that doesn't require them abandoning everything that's come before? It's going to be a change. It's going to be messy sometimes. It's not going to be perfect, but it's helping to give them the visibility, the tools, and honestly the encouragement to take that initiative and create a future for themselves. When you show up there and you tell them, like, hey, I want to run with you. When you ask them, like,
mhm,
I want to learn tracking. Can you show me? When you see the kids look at, like, the look in their eyes when they see that inevitably you're a source of power, right? You have a 4x4 truck, you have a cell phone, you have clean clothes, you have white skin, or whatever. You're obviously not from there. You've taken time out of your life to go to another place just to be there, right? That's something they have never done and never will do.
mhm,
Just
mhm,
that alone is,
mhm,
there's an imbalance there. So if a person with all this ostensible power and all of the sort of prestige that's put on top of that is going to my father or my grandfather or my grandmother and
yeah.
asking her for wisdom and asking her for knowledge, that's a very powerful lesson for the next generation, saying, hey, like, if I learn well, if I learn how to track and hunt and gather, and I learn the medicine, like, I'm going to have a chance at surviving here. Because
Mhm,
right now their current situation is either I try and you know eke out some way of surviving through the traditional ways, and honestly, I'm going to go hungry for like many weeks on end, or I can go to a town that's 500 kilometers away. Maybe with a bit of luck, I can get a job like cleaning the bathroom at the gas station, and like maybe I'll have enough to eat. You know, those are kind of their options at this point. You know,
mm.
and so we're trying to create another path. And so sorry, I said 2 minute answer. It's turning into a 20-minute answer.
Right,
But
yes.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
it's partly the personal motivation. It's helping these people,
Yeah.
supporting them on their path, but then also beyond the specific people there, it's I see it as helping the human race. Like we're at a point with genetic engineering, with robotics, with AI, with brain implants, all this stuff that's coming. And I mean, honestly, it's already here. But I
Mhm,
think I don't know if it's gonna be 5 years or 50, but there will be a time, probably not too far in the future, when we have to decide, like, are we going to get the internet brain plant or not? Like, am I going to be wirelessly connected to you or not? Like, and I think as a species, we're incredibly, like, ill-equipped to make that decision. We have no idea what that means,
mhm,
you know. And
mhm,
there's a lot of really intelligent people backed by a lot of money working very, very hard to create humanity 2.0,
mhm,
and we have no idea what humanity 1.0 is.
mhm,
And that to me is like a very dangerous situation. And
mhm,
so a big part of my motivation as well was, through conversations I've had with some people who are like deeply embedded in this space and really working hard to create this technology, when I had sort of this moment of like, holy shit, this is real. Like this is happening. It's
Yeah.
not science fiction. Like it's happening right now.
Mhm.
And I was like, we like I have to do something, for myself, for my son, for humanity. Like I don't know what, but I need to do something. And so all of these things just kind of coalesced, and now like that's the Kalahari project. You know.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, feel free to dig in anywhere you want.
Yeah, there was a lot there. Thank you for expanding that 2-minute response to many more. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, well, for people who don't know, like persistence hunt, you said persistence hunting multiple
yeah,
times. I imagine
yeah,
there's many people that don't even know what you're saying. So could you
yeah,
just
totally.
briefly describe what that is? Because it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, yeah. It's basically it's hunting without weapons, and it's basically long distance running. You run, jog, walk, track an animal until it gets tired out. Generally because of getting overheated in the sun, and it gets to a point of exhaustion where it just kind of lies down and gives up, and
Yeah.
and then that's dinner. And anthropologically speaking, there is some debate, but it seems pretty clear that our ability to well, I mean, there's a lot of different genetic adaptations that allow us to do this, right? It's
Mhm.
we have sweat glands that can cool us down. We're bipedal, which means that our breathing rhythm and the rhythm of our running can be different. And for any four-legged animal, that's not true. If it's running fast, it's breathing fast, which means if it's hot outside, it's breathing in a lot of hot and dry air. It's going to overheat very quickly. Um, and so we're obviously in a sprint, we're much slower than pretty much any other animal on Earth. But if we can use our ability to track to stay behind that animal even when we can't see it, and keep flushing it back out into the sun, back out into moving, after 4, 6, 10 hours, it will eventually reach a point of exhaustion. And humans, in theory, in practice, throughout history, but in theory today, humans are still capable of doing that. And it's something that, as far as I know, I'm the only outsider who's successfully done it. As far as like documented hunts, definitely. Um, you know, the world's a big place. You never know.
Yeah.
But there's very few people who who have done this. And
Yeah.
I don't want to put myself on a pedestal. It's like there are a lot of people who are better runners than I am. You look at, I mean, go to any major mountain race around here. There's a lot of people who are faster than me and more capable than me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But this is a very different context. There's no aid stations, there's no
Right.
water, there's no food, there's no trails. You don't set the pace. There's a huge psychological component, and
Yeah.
that I think is where I thrive. Is
Yeah.
like I really enjoy that aspect of sort of playing with the inner sensations, playing with the way I'm visualizing things, the way I'm framing the experience, and finding ways to be able to keep going even when the body's screaming at you like slow down. you know
Yeah.
and I really enjoy that.
I imagine I've never done anything like an ultra marathon or anything like
Yeah,
that, but I've ran a
yeah,
lot in my life. I
yeah,
imagine persistence hunting collaboratively with a group of men is worlds apart from running a linear race,
yeah,
just to tag the kilometers. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, again, there's so many places that I would love to go. Well, something that people might not understand too is that these people in the Kalahari arguably might have one of the oldest cultures on Earth.
yeah,
And when you, so there's just so much importance, I think, to be placed on that for different reasons. And
yeah,
when you begin to learn about how many distinct cultures and peoples and indigenous lifeways have been completely erased from this earth over the
mhm,
past few hundred years,
yeah,
um, it becomes vitally more important to pay attention to how we can somehow, in some humble way, offer our love and our appreciation and our support to people who are still living in some kind of indigenous context,
yeah,
because it's not just for those people, like you're saying, it's for humanity. Every
mm,
time we lose a group of people and a language and indigenous life ways, we're losing an essential thread to the fabric of our shared humanity. You read
Yeah.
a book like, I think it's called Light at the Edge of the World
Mm.
by Wade Davis, and he explores, he talks about different indigenous cultures that have gone extinct, essentially,
Mm.
just in the last like century. And
Yeah.
he really talks about how important it is to remember that if we are locked in this kind of gridlock orientation that um, consumer culture, modernity, and globalization and capitalism is the way for humanity, we are forgetting that our connection to place and to landscape is how we evolved, that our relationship to particular locales is how we tap into um, these essential elements of what it means to be human. And it's how we bring our unique gifts to the world,
Mm.
too. If we're
Yeah.
not in direct communication and communion with the more than human world of which we are surrounded by in our immediate context, then we're not able to tap into our fundamental humanity, essentially. And so supporting these people to revive their culture, you're saying there's only a handful of these men that are still doing this. And when
Yeah.
you go there and you're inspiring the youth that are feeling that disconnect or that pull to something that's
Mm.
that's being promised to them,
Yeah.
uh, that's other than what their ecological and cultural context is, you're inspiring them to maybe look at that differently. Like that
Mm.
is such a beautiful and important um, act
Mm.
to give yourself to.
Yeah.
And there's things I'd like to talk about there, but before we get too far, you mentioned much earlier that you've been aiming to deepen your relationship to the world. Said something like that.
Mm.
And I thought, what does he mean by that? I'd be curious to know what that means to you.
Mm. I'm I'm in the process of like multiple years of study and writing to try and define what that means. Um, so I'm not sure how good of an answer I can give to you here, but I think what it means for me currently is it starts with my relationship with myself, moving away from this sort of culturally accepted idea of like a disembodied brain, and we're just not even a brain, like very isolated forms of intelligence, which we identify with as like the essence of our being,
Mhm,
um, and digging underneath that as deeply as I can to understand all the different layers of myself and the ways they interact and the ways in which they can interact more gracefully, more in line with who I want to be. Um, and by deepening my understanding of myself, my relationship with myself, I can take that into my relationships with other humans and with the world around me. And so
mm,
the world, the way I do that in the natural world, um, I mean, it's a lot of it is just being in nature. Um, I, I have a strong streak of like I like to do things. I like to move. I like to be active.
mhm,
I like to run and to surf and to climb and to jump and you know it's I have a very strong tendency to just when I'm outside I just want to move, and I think that's great. That's wonderful. But it's also an important part of the practice not to do anything. Not even to meditate. Like it's just being.
yeah.
Meditating is an activity as well. It's got a whole sort of philosophy around it, and it's got a whole sort of set of rules and blah blah blah. And just
Mhm,
be, let yourself be. You know, it's like see if you can learn from that tree over there. You know, see if you can learn from the leaves that are composting on the ground. Like, what does that mean? What does that feel like?
mhm,
You know, and so it might be, you know, spending 3 days or 5 days in nature, maybe without eating, maybe without drinking, and just being. If I can do that a few times a year, that's a lot for me. It used to be a lot more when I didn't have a son, when I didn't have a house. Life was different. I every summer I spent in Alaska. I worked in Alaska for 2 to 3 months out of the year, and was
Wow.
basically alone for that entire time.
Wow.
And that was transformational for me. I mean, I basically had like 2 to 3 months silent retreat every year, in the middle of Alaska, and that definitely, there's like a before and after there, you know. And there's so many
How-
situations where you're just so
Go ahead.
so exposed. It's like
Mhm.
there's the only thing between me and death is like this little piece of plastic that's like a rain jacket. Like if I didn't have this, like it's cold enough and I'm far enough away where like I would die. Or
Mhm.
you're out in the middle of a lake or in the ocean, and you've got a little, an aluminum boat that's like, 3 millimeters thick. And it's like,
Mhm.
that's all there is between me and death. And yeah, there's no rescue services or anything that could come to help you if you get in trouble. It's just either you're alive, you're aware, you're engaged, or you're dead. You know. And there's something really beautiful about the simplicity and the clarity of that. And I think that's how most of nature is.
Mhm.
That's real life.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's again coming back to these more sort of what can seem like extreme practices of ice bathing or sweat lodges, or I don't know, jumping from one tree to another, or whatever it is. Like, yeah, in our context it can seem extreme, but in our genetic context as a species, like that's just life. Like that's who we are. That's what we need. We thrive on that. And to me, it's a part of um, being a body. You know, um, we talk about like embodied wisdom, which I think is, it's a nice phrase. But it's like, what about bodily wisdom? What about just being wise in your body? Like, what does that feel like?
Mhm.
You know, um, and yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
It
there's,
does, and it raised many
yeah.
more. Well, how would you answer that last question that you asked yourself?
Mm, yeah, yeah. For me, I'm actively exploring like what I think of as sort of multiple layers of cognition that are within the body and the brain, um, which can be the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine system, the muscular system, the myofascial system, and then within the brain, different sort of evolutionary layers of the brainstem, the limbic system, um, the neocortex. Like it, they all interact in really complex ways, and it's really easy to oversimplify. But at the same time, we can differentiate between them, and they have different ways of perceiving reality and reacting to reality.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm sort of actively trying to explore like all the different ways in which my body is perceiving the world and reacting to it, and trying to get those into to better communication with each other. So like if we're talking about the endocrine system, for example, like that's a system of glands in the body that secrete different hormones, and those hormones have an effect on the way we feel, the way we behave, the way we think. When we
Mhm.
talk about um, you know, I don't know, serotonin or cortisol or these things like that's produced by the endocrine system.
Mhm.
And and so the way it communicates with us is by sending us these chemical signals that then react inside our body and make all these different processes happen. Some of them are much clearer and more obvious, like your heart starts beating faster and you feel stressed. But some of them are much slower, and it's like having trouble sleeping, and like I'm not recovering as quickly as I used to from like intense physical activity, or all these different systems. And it's like, okay, how can I tap into my endocrine system a little bit more? And
Mhm.
well, there the answers seems to be, well, try and re-regulate your circadian rhythms. Get
Mhm.
out in the morning, go to bed earlier at night. Do some nice bout of physical activity earlier in the day. You know, simple things like that. But it's like we don't often think of that as a form of cognition or wisdom, but I think that's
Mm,
in evolutionary terms, that's exactly what it is. You know, it's a precursor to the nervous system. It's a way of engaging with the world and responding to it and interpreting it. And
mhm,
it's actually using like very similar tools to what unicellular organisms use to communicate with external things. You know, they're using chemical sensors to figure out where's the food, where's the danger. And
mhm,
we've incorporated that within ourselves. And like we are multiple, right? We're a swarm of beings, you know, not just in the gut where we have, you know, loads more microbial cells than we do human cells. But like all of the tools that our body uses to communicate internally are adaptations of other beings that have kind of coalesced and come together and said, okay, we're gonna join forces here and see what we can do together. You know, and
mhm,
like mitochondria, for example, like have different DNA than we do. Like they've
mhm,
retained their independence even when they're incorporated within us. It's our source of energy. Without mitochondria, we die. But it's a different species, you know. And so it's really like if you look at like the origin of life, which you know no one knows exactly how life started, but it can be seen as this sort of progressive dance of joining together these capabilities that were individual between one cell and another cell. Like what happens if we break that wall down and we join together and we share our resources and we share our capabilities, and now we're going to collaborate and we're becoming a two-cell organism, you know, and then that grows and grows and grows. And so it's like evolution is just this series of sort of like increasing refinements of these tools that essentially, as far as my understanding goes, are designed to help us move toward the things that we sense will be good for us, and moving away from the things that we sense will do us harm. You know, and that's what life is about. It's just an attempt to do that, and it's an increasingly refined process. And we get into all kinds of abstract thoughts, and you know, in the human species, especially in the Western world, we can get really far afield from that, and we have all these crazy complex fantasies. But at essence, when you bring it all down, it's just what am I moving toward? What am I moving away from? What is
mhm,
it that I sense that I need more of, and what is it that I sense I need less of? And so to me, wisdom is really tapping into that as cleanly, as clearly as possible, and trying to honor the hundreds of millions of years of evolution that have, you know, contributed to make me who I am. And rather than just leading with one part of my brain or one part of my body, taking the whole thing and engaging fully in the experience and just trying to be as present as alive as possible.
mhm. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just so incredible to contemplate the depth of intelligence that this earth has um, crafted over the aeons, that it's been self-organizing to care for its biosphere and all the different emanations that have risen up from this earth, including us, is
Yeah.
just so miraculous. And to remember to keep that knowing close, that we are the emanation of this vast experimental self-organizing project
Mm,
that's that's from this whole earthly presence and spirit and
yeah.
animation is so important because for many reasons. I mean, something that I'm hearing in what you're saying, like an undertone, is that you carry the magic and the medicine and the creative capacity of all the processes and experimentations and contacts and communications that have gone into the evolutionary process that has brought you into existence, into life, that
Mm,
that you carry all of that wisdom within you in some way,
mm,
and in that way it's not yours. It's
mm,
You are a steward of that wisdom for the moment, and it seems like, from my understanding, the best way to honor that is to settle into the body as fully and completely as possible,
mm,
to recognize the holonic structure of the body, and to
mm,
tend to all those different systems as lovingly and with as much deep listening as we can.
Mm.
And that is integrative health. That's integral health when we really tune into that in a real way.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing all that, man. Is
Yeah.
there? I saw you looked like you had a thought there. You want to say?
Yeah. Two things. One is, I mean, I agree with you. I think that's exactly right. And at the same time, I think in the little microcosms of the world where people talk and think in these ways, we can often tend toward making everything soft and nice and gentle and politically correct and
Oh, tell
respectful.
me more about that.
Um, I think, you know, I mean, from my main area of focus is, you know, therapy, it's psychology, it's, and if you look at that, the process, the way we go about trying to heal people in the psychological realm, I mean, it makes sense in our context that there are a lot of people who are living with incredibly high levels of stress and just don't have the resources to deal with that. You know, like our society makes it hard. And so having a place where you can just be cared for and listened to, and you know, there's nothing offensive is being said, and everything you express is just amazing and wonderful and beautiful. Like there is some healing power in that, but it's up to a point, you know, and then there comes a point where it's just tying yourself into a knot, and
Mhm,
you're becoming weaker and more fragile and more sensitive. And if someone doesn't talk to me the way my therapist does, then like I don't want to have this relationship with you.
mm.
And there's something pretty, I think there's something dangerous about that, you know. And
I fully agree with that.
if we look to nature or to any indigenous culture, like things are a lot more rough and tumble, you know. and
Mhm,
and and I mean, to start with, the idea of an individual psychology doesn't really exist. But even if it did, the way to wholeness, to healing, is it's not easy and it's not fun. Like, you know, it might be 3 days of singing and dancing without sleeping. You know, no food, no drink. It might be, you know, you know, yeah, you know. I mean, every culture has its thing, you know, but it's basically the common denominator, as far as I can tell, is pushing you beyond the limits of what you think is possible, beyond who you think you are, and
mm,
forcing you, often violently, into an understanding of, no, I'm bigger than I think I am, and
mhm,
I can therefore participate in this bigger whole. That's
mhm,
my family, my community, you know, the world that contains me.
mhm,
And I think there's a place for that too. And in our culture, you know, when we talk about, I don't know, ice baths or ultra marathons, like the image that comes to mind is like this really sort of like testosterone filled, high adrenaline, like just, you know, superficial performance based type of thing, which it definitely can be, but it doesn't have to be. And there are ways to engage in really intense physical activity and really challenging, difficult situations that are deeply spiritual and help you to grow. You know, and I
mm,
think as a culture, like we're not doing a good job at maintaining that awareness. You know, and I think there's place for being like very physically fit, very active, very engaged with the body in a way that's sometimes like very full on. But the point of it is connecting more deeply with yourself and connecting more deeply with the world around you. You know, and like we have that ability too. We can be soft and calm and gentle, and there's a time and place for that. And we can be hard, and we can be fast, and we can be aggressive, and there's a time and place for that as well. You know,
mhm. I
and
agree.
uh,
Go ahead. Yeah.
no, sorry, and I just like going back to when we were talking about the Kalahari. Um, I think this ties into this as well. Of like, you know, we mentioned a few times, you know, gender, race, these things that in our culture, especially in American culture, can be incredibly sensitive, and there's so many
Mm,
watchdogs, and it's just everyone's like so eager to be offended,
mm,
um, and there's a lot of pain there, and there's a lot of damage that's been done by a lot of people for a lot of years, and like I understand that and I respect that, um, and I just want to say that in the Kalahari, when I talk to the people there and share stories with them, sit by the fire, share food. Um, you know, what I tell them is like, I'm from here too. It was a long time ago. My ancestors went up north and got lost for a while, but like I'm back here now, and that's
Mm,
how it feels to me. It's like I'm back home. You know,
mm,
and that's something that, depending on who hears that, that might feel very offensive and
right,
whitewashing and
right.
whatever. Um, but to them, to the people who are there, the people who I care about,
Yeah,
it's not offensive. It makes sense. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, of course. Let's go hunt. What's the problem? There's no problem.
yeah.
And I think I'm not saying race is unimportant or gender is unimportant. There's a lot of inequality in the world, and things need to be done about that. But one way of doing something about that is engaging with humans as humans and just
Yeah.
letting go of everything else. And it's a place in the world where if you go with humility and respect and you want to contribute, you're going to be greeted with open arms. And it doesn't matter what color skin you have or what your ancestors did or didn't do. Like, if you want to hunt, you go hunting. If you want to gather, you go gather. Whatever you get, you share with everyone else. Life is good. And I think that is something, again, in this little microcosm we both seem to be living in. It's like a lot of us need some help remembering that. It's like
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Hmm.
You know, we can let go of a lot of stuff just by engaging with humans as humans.
Hmm.
So yeah, just want to put that out there.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I just to touch back on what you were talking about for a moment there around there not being an individual psychology
Mm,
in the sense that there's this hyper focus and really kind of obsessive way that typical therapeutic processes focus on the self and the
yeah.
individual self. Man, it, I I keep trying to in my own life as much as I can. I'm turning to the forest, to the lake, to my dogs, to my lover, to the garden, and I'm trying to just deepen my connection, my felt sense understanding of these beings throughout the days,
Mm,
because I notice that when I'm not intentionally carving out time and space to be in that way with the land and with the creatures of the land, that I start to feel sick in
mm,
myself. I start to feel stressed and anxiety and various kinds of psychological and even physical pains from
mm,
being so turned in on myself and so focused on myself. And so the most simple way for me, and given my context, is to just turn to my immediate environment. I would say that that's the most simple way for everyone. And so this is
mm,
something that I'm consistently inviting my clients to do. Turn to the waterways,
mm,
turn to the forest. Like, go there when you're feeling stressed and when you're feeling overwhelmed, that
mm,
you're, by expanding your sense of self and your awareness into a greater ecological context, you are naturally going to feel yourself diffuse. You're naturally going to feel some kind of, like the Greeks had this word, I think it's astasis. I
mm,
think I'm saying that right. And it's the feeling you get when you walk into a room and there's a puppy there
mm,
and you see each other for the first time. And there's this sense of like, there's something shared in that moment that's beyond words, and it's
mm,
so pure and it's so immediate. And the Greeks would say that this was a moment of soul sharing, that your two so-called individual selves meld in that moment and share soul essence, and that's important and significant. And you don't, like, you can have that experience if you have puppies around or babies or things like that, but that's typically if you're just in city life, going to work, doing your things in your patterns, you might not be having so many experiences like that. So I
Yeah.
think the most obvious way to do that is to immerse yourself in the natural spaces that are most immediate. The deeper ways are to actually go out into like wilder spaces
Yeah.
and have experiences like you're speaking to in group contact out in wild spaces doing very human things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would love to hear if you're willing to share some kind of um, almost if you could like tell the story of what it might be like to go through that persistence hunting like through the day,
Mm.
with people. Is that something you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely.
I'd love to get a
Um,
sense of that.
yeah, I mean, the the biggest challenge is or I am often in, a different state of consciousness that
Yeah, right.
isn't actively taking notes.
Mm,
It a lot of it feels kind of like a blur.
right.
Um, but I mean, it's oftentimes the day before you've gone out, looked for tracks, um, tried to identify, is it male, is it female? How many animals are in this group? Do they seem to be, big, not so big? Does anyone have a limp? Like, what are the key details here?
Mm,
Is this something worth trying to run after? And if those tracks have been identified, there's a likely candidate. Then it's getting out an early start, often, right around sunrise, um, sometimes before, and getting as close as you can to the animal without it being able to perceive you. So silence is your friend, like very
mm,
deep, real silence. The way you breathe, the way you talk, the way you step, um, and they have bows and arrows there. They're very very small. The arrows don't kill on impact like the way most arrows do in the Western world. There's a poison there, and the poison can take 2, 3, 4 days to take effect, to kill the animal. Um, but it's it's pretty much guaranteed that the animal's going to die. So even if you're going with the idea of persistence hunting, most people bring a bow and arrow along, and if you can get close enough to get a clean shot in, then you do that,
for
and then
sure.
you can run. And if you get it earlier, great. And if not, you just keep following it, and you'll get it
Mhm,
afterward. Um, so there's this process of you see which way the animal's going. You want to get close to it in a way where the wind is going to be going from it to you, right? So sometimes you just keep going in your path. Sometimes you need to take a big circle around and come back where you hope it's going to still be headed, and get close enough to it where the wind isn't gonna be in your way. Um, and so it's this sort of, yeah, this very slow sort of navigation, trying to figure out, okay, how can we get as close as possible? If you're lucky, someone gets a clean shot, you get a hit. And if not, once the animal has sensed you, you start running, right? And so oftentimes there's just a lot of adrenaline, and people start out way too fast. Same
mm,
that we see in any race anywhere in the world. You feel invincible for the first 10 minutes, and then it's like, oh shit, you know.
right.
Um, um,
Yeah.
but it's it's a game, a dance. I don't know. I mean, you're basically trying to keep one particular animal in movement as much as possible, right? And so if there's 4, 5, 20 animals, doesn't matter. There's more than one. You've got to know which animal is it that we're following, which tracks are we following, and you want to be moving quickly enough that it has as little time to rest as possible, but not so quickly that you get exhausted before he does. And so it's like once you know where he is, then you can shout, you scream, you like make all the noise you can, get him scared, get him out running again. And then it's just slow and steady trying to find him again, because all animals have basically a like a safety distance they'll have, right? Like one species will run 200 meters and then they'll rest. Another one maybe 500 meters and then it will rest. And it's whatever distance that species has evolved to sense is safe enough. As long as there's this sort of margin, I know I can outrun whatever's coming to get me.
Mm.
You know, and so it's just going to run, 200 meters, 300 meters, whatever it is, and then stop in the shade and rest as much as it can. And if you don't find it, that could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. If it gets an hour of rest, you're basically starting from zero again. So there's a very strong drive to like find it as quickly as possible and back out into the sun, back out into movement, get it going.
Mhm.
And inevitably someone, gets a cramp, someone gets tired, someone gets a thorn through their foot, they have to stop. The group gets smaller, people get more and more tired, the energy starts dwindling, and you pretty quickly start entering into sort of a trance state, or at least I do. I can't speak for anyone else, but within an hour, 2 hours, like, it's hot, the air is very dry. um it's it's a challenge for sure. There's no paths. I mean, no, there are some paths. Elephants make paths. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can run on one for a while. But oftentimes, you're running in and out of thorn bushes, and you're jumping, dodging. It's not just like a jog in the park. It's very dynamic.
What about as you're running and you're in this trance-like flow state,
Mm,
running through the bush, through these areas that I'm sure you're not really familiar with?
yeah.
Is there a real and possibly really important concern, and certainly some kind of awareness to have around other animals that might be in these areas
Mm,
that could feel threatened by you running through, such as lions or something like that?
yeah.
You run through their zone, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. The lions, I've never. There are very few there,
Okay.
unfortunately, and they're mostly asleep during the day, so not
Right, in the
not
heat.
such a threat. Yeah.
Right.
Elephants can be an issue, especially if they're around places where people have treated them poorly in the past.
Mhm,
They
mm,
can have some pretty negative associations with humans.
mhm.
Um, Actually, just the past trip, I had an encounter from, I mean, a big bull charged me, got maybe 15 feet away before stopping, just got up super big. Its ears were out, its trunk was up, and it was just like right there,
Whoa.
and that was pretty intense.
Whoa, I just saw a
Yeah.
video recently of,
Mm,
must have been like a security cam or something, and I
yeah.
think it was in India, and this dude was like smacking this elephant on the shins, and
Mm,
the elephant just had enough.
yeah.
How long has it been smacked for? And the
Yeah.
video captured this elephant kicked him over and then
Mm,
just started crushing him into nothing.
yeah.
Just pressing him into the earth, and he just flattened this person. Like,
Wow.
those creatures are beyond powerful. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
compared to our tiny little human fleshy things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure. For
Anyway,
sure.
please continue.
No, 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 no. Yeah, it's an important reminder. For me in that experience, I was just uh, I had no choice. There was nothing I could do. It's
Yeah.
just I like just stood up, put my hands up, and was just like, we'll see what happens. Because
Mm,
I know, I mean, elephants can run way faster than I can. If it wanted to kill me, it would, no matter what I do. And so,
right. Did you feel
um,
fear, or was there just a total kind of present
yeah.
awareness? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there wasn't enough time for fear. I don't know what it was. I didn't feel fear at all. It was really strange. Like, afterwards, I was like thinking about it. Like, well, that was pretty wild. Like, that's never happened before. Like, I was
Yeah.
discharged by an elephant. And I had to like remind myself that it was something big. It was just like it felt like nothing. Like, I just felt like it was just, yeah, fully just present. Just lift my arms up. Just be there. He came at me, he paused, he sort of did his thing, then he just turned around and walked away. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that was that, you know. And I've
In-
had encounters with bears, with other, you know,
mm,
animals that can be aggressive, that can be deadly. Um, I think maybe it's just the sheer size, where there's just absolutely no, like, there was no thought in my mind, like, there's nothing I can do. I'm not. It never. I think maybe some aspect of fear is like the fear of doing the wrong thing. or
Mm,
like maybe I won't do what I need to do, what I should do. It was so clear to me there's nothing I can do. Like why be afraid? Like I just, if it kills me, and that's it. Um,
mm, mm,
and I don't know, that's the only way I can explain it really. The felt sense was just calm, just okay, this is happening. And that was
mm,
it. That was it.
mm,
So elephants can be a thing. Snakes can be a thing. Um, there's cobras, there's I don't remember all the was it puff adder or black adder, I don't know. There's poisonous snakes there that if they bite you out in the bush, like pretty good chance you're not going to make it back. But there's not a lot of them, and basically as long as you don't step on its tail, like you're going to be fine. You know,
right.
snakes are not going around looking for humans to bite.
Mm, mm,
And so I mean, I don't know if I've gotten lucky or just it's just not that big of an issue. But I haven't had. I mean, apart from that elephant encounter, which wasn't during a hunt, I haven't had a real encounter where I felt like, wow, that was close.
mm, mm,
You know, for me, it's about the elements. It's the tiredness, it's the sand, it's the thorns, it's the heat, it's the dry air,
yeah,
um,
right.
and it's there's like no shortcut back home. There's no rescue vehicle that can pick you up. So there's this real sense of like, okay, I'm pushing at my limits. I'm feeling tired, but I want to keep going. But if if I get too tired, like I don't know what's going to happen next. Like I don't want to spend the night out here. Because then yeah, lions do come out at night, and and it gets
Mm,
cold at night as well. And like that there's a sense in which it would be very easy to start letting the fear sort of take hold of you. Um,
right.
but obviously that's the least efficient way to run. if you're worried about what's going to happen next, like you're wasting a whole lot of energy, and that's
Yeah.
not going to contribute to your success. So
So
it's
you're
this balance.
consistently reaching thresholds
Hmm.
and supposed limits,
Yeah,
and you're crossing them.
yeah,
I wonder about, like, so you're saying, if you're holding on to some kind of fear, that it'll probably be more difficult to cross those thresholds.
yeah,
So is it just a letting go? I mean, you mentioned that it's like some kind of trance state. Earlier in the
hmm,
conversation, you
yeah,
suggested there's some kind of transcendent experience happening.
yeah,
So is it that you're just letting go into that trance,
yeah,
that just can kind of let you get through
yeah,
what, almost anything?
yeah. I mean, I think wisdom is knowing where the real limits are. You know, and real limits do exist. Like I can't run forever. No one can run forever.
Mm,
Um, and it's learning to differentiate between the perceived limits and the real limits. And it's not easy. Like when it's at every encounter, you don't know. There's always an element of the unknown. No matter how many times you've done it before, today is different.
mhm, mhm,
You know, um, and yeah, I mean, for me, I play around a lot with this, and sort of I don't have like a single way that I go about doing it. Sometimes it can be more of like a meditative focus of really, focusing on the body, focusing on the breath, focusing on the physical sensation, one step after another, just let the mind go, like full presence.
mm,
Sometimes it can be visions. I've had like a demon enter my body and, just it moves my body for me.
mm,
Um, it can be a lot of different things.
mm,
What it definitely isn't for me is pushing myself through it. Like it's not a David Goggins approach. Um, and even David Goggins, like I don't know if he would admit it or not, but he describes some of his experiences in like a pretty spiritual way. He gets there too. I think from a very different path.
yeah.
There's a lot of pain and a lot of aggression, and mainly directed toward himself.
Mm,
Um, but even there, he gets. I mean, he has visualizations, which it's basically it's a guided meditation, and he's got his cookie jar of insults or whatever it is he's dealing with, and like proving to this person that he's better and proving to that person he's better, whatever. He has his mental world, his constructs, and he's
Mm,
engaged with that while he's running. And you look
mm,
at pretty much any long distance runner, they have their sort of mental schema, like Courtney DeWalter talks about her pain cave, and she like goes into the pain cave, and she's like hacking away at the cave, and the more it hurts, the more work she's doing to make the cave bigger and increase her capacity to feel pain.
yeah.
um, what's his name? Killian Jornet talks about like painting. He's like painting a canvas, and like as he's running, he's like visualizing the path that he's marking on the trail. And so again, I think it's something we all do. Um, just it just happens. It's part of who we are.
Yeah.
But we can start to do it consciously and direct it.
Yeah.
It can be a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and I think probably more effective as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and so for me, I sort of go back and forth between really focusing on the body and being really present and like inhabiting my thigh muscles and like letting that be the center of my being,
Mm,
to having this, just like out of body, like just let the breath breathe, let the legs move, and just the body just goes. Like I'm not, I'm just observing and not even really that. It's just happening, you know.
hmm hmm
And I kind of vacillate between those two. So I have those
hmm
tendencies.
Yeah, I understand that rhythm you're speaking to.
Uh,
I can't imagine what it'd be like to do it in that kind of context. But yeah, it's well, we don't have much longer, man. There's so many questions I have for you. This is so fascinating. Yeah, I think I'd like to know actually, because you were explaining how that day might go, and you said that it could take days, right,
mm,
for these hunts to come to some kind of completion.
yeah,
And so that to me makes me think, well, then you're maybe really far away from whatever kind of camp might be set up,
yeah.
back from where you left. So could you take us through and I don't know if you've even experienced this or not, but when you do get to that animal and
Mm,
that animal is exhausted and
mm,
it's the time to either kill them or they've died from that arrow.
yeah,
Um, what is happening then? And then the processing of the animal and getting it all the way back home.
yeah,
What is
yeah,
that like with the group?
yeah. No, that's a good question. So try your best to make it stay as close as possible. Like you can run many kilometers, but not necessarily be that many kilometers away from camp. If you've done a good job, you're keeping the animal sort of going in circles and sort of
Okay.
edging out, because they're constantly watching you, right? And they're taking the best path they have away from you. So if you're
Right.
going behind it, you go out an angle to the right a little bit, they're sooner or later they're going to compensate and go to the left a little bit.
Right.
So you're playing constantly with, like, I mean, base level is just following the animal, right?
Yeah.
But then you're playing with, okay, playing with the wind, making sure I can get as close as possible without them perceiving me, and then making sure they don't go too far away from camp,
Mm,
because I mean, you're right. If you're 50, 60 kilometers away from camp and you've just run your heart out, like, it's a lot of work to get that meat back. And these
yeah.
are these are big animals. I mean, it can be
Yeah.
up to like 1,000 kilos, 2,000 pounds. It's a
Right.
big animal, and even if there's 5 or 6 of you, that's not easy.
The
So
animal being, I don't know if you've said what species are
generally speaking, it'd be a kudu.
a
Um, there,
kudu. Okay.
there are a lot of different
Beautiful.
species there. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
But some type of antelope,
yeah.
eagle and kudu are kind of the biggest ones, and sort of the easiest to tire.
Mm,
Because they get hotter faster, because they're big and they have like a thick layer of fat on them.
mm.
Um, but uh, traditionally, my understanding is that rather than moving the animal back to camp, they would move the camp to the animal. You
That
know?
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I haven't experienced that, because now the people aren't as nomadic, more sedentary, they're bigger groups. It's a
Mm,
different dynamic. But if you
yeah.
imagine a group of, say, 12, 15 people, that's like a unit. 2, 3 men go out to hunt. One of them stays to keep the lions away, start processing the meat. Or maybe two of them stay. One of them goes back to camp and says, "Hey, like, dinner's that way."
Mm,
Everyone
mm,
packs up, and in a matter of an hour or two, you can build another hut, and that's your new camp. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're nomadic and I think in a very, very like profound sense of like they just wherever there's water, wherever there's food, that's where we go. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Wow.
and now in the context of today, where it's things are a bit more sedentary. I mean, it's a challenge. What I've done is take back all you can. If you have to leave something, you leave it, come back as quickly as possible, or other people go and find it. Um, yeah, leave someone behind so that they can sort of guard it. It kind of depends how far away you are, how tired people are. Um, I definitely don't call the shots there. Whatever they tell me to do, it's like, all right,
Mm,
sounds good. Let's
of
do it.
course.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um, you know.
Mm,
But for me, there's this moment of killing. I think is a key moment, and it's something that we as a culture um, aren't very wise about. And I think, I mean, so I should say I was vegetarian for 6 years. I was vegan for 2. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to dedicate myself to doing no harm in the world. I personally got to a place where I was very sick. I lost a bunch of weight. I just like was not
mm,
taking care of myself.
mm,
Um, Before anyone jumps on me, like I'm not making any claims about anyone else. I'm not saying, my path is not a universal path. This is my path. My personal path out of that was when I went to Alaska and I saw the quantity of death that was happening all day, every day around me, and how undramatic it was. It's like,
mm,
wait a minute, there's something going on here. Like maybe killing is a part of life. Maybe
mm,
maybe I by trying to exit out of this cycle, I'm doing violence to myself and putting myself in a supposed position of superiority, which I haven't earned.
mm,
And for me, the challenge is how can I engage in the cycle of life and death in a way that feels ethical and feels like I'm contributing to the world? And that to me is a much harder challenge than just not eating meat or not killing animals, which is hard, but it's much, much harder to do the work necessary to earn that kill, you know. And I think that's something that just comes naturally to the people who are living in the Kalahari. They're living in symbiotic balance with their environment, and they always have been. Um, and when you can kill in that context, I mean, to the degree I've been able to get close to that, um, it, it's I mean, the only way I can describe it is killing with love. It's and by love I mean like a union with the other.
mm,
It's like it's my job to kill you, it's your job to die. Like that's how we're participating in the cycle right now. And
mm,
that's neither good nor bad, it's just the way it is. And and no one's going to change that. And
mm,
there's this deep sense of like it's inevitable. It just is.
mm,
And it's not ethical, it's not unethical, it just is. And I think there's something for me really transformative in that. And it's really again because of my own personal journey and finding my own place in the world. It's like there is a sense in which it's yeah, you can see it as aggressive. It's taking a life. Um, but at the same time that's who we are. That's what animals do. That's what life does. It recycles itself. Um, and we're engaged in that process whether we like it or not. And for me personally, I would much rather look an animal in the eye and kill it and eat it than just be 3 steps removed and killing an entire species because of my carbon footprint or whatever. um,
mm,
you know
mhm.
and I again, I don't want to preach to anyone. Like, I'm not saying what other people have to do with their lives. But for me personally, that's a very rich and very challenging path. It's an
Mhm.
ideal I definitely don't live up to all day, every day. Um, but it's something I strive toward.
I think it's important to speak to the human capacity to have some kind of affectionate, maybe even a bond, some kind of affectionate bond with the animals that we're
Mm,
hunting. and killing.
mm,
You speak in that way to indigenous peoples whose life ways are very much tied up in hunting and killing, and it's
mm,
completely obvious to them. Modern minds and hearts have a very difficult time with that. I think there's many reasons. I think
mm,
one of the big reasons is dislocation and not being embedded in place, and the
yeah,
globalization of goods and foods and things like that, that everything is so far removed from our immediate interactions with our environment.
yeah,
And but it's important, is my point, to remind people that at least that we should consider there are different ways to know what it means to take life and to bring it into our own life. And
mm,
that indigenous folks who see that as sacred and intimate and affectionate are not some kind of um, backwards people who haven't evolved to have modern ethics, but
mm,
that way is wrapped up in the ethics of the land. It's a land ethic.
yeah,
And this is what you're speaking to, is how difficult it is to transform your ethics into that more land-based, immanent way of
mm,
engagement.
yeah,
Um, so thank you for speaking to that and
yeah,
being honest about that.
mm,
Um, yeah, we're near the end here.
yeah,
Oh, dude, thank you so much for this
yeah,
conversation. It's been
yeah, no,
really
thank you.
interesting and inspiring.
Mm,
And like I said, I have so many things that I'm still curious about getting
yeah,
into with you. But I think we should tie it up, and maybe I'll give it over to you rather than ask a question. It
mm,
seems like you have a lot to say, and I'm really
mm,
appreciating everything that you have said.
mm,
So maybe you have a way of tying this conversation up
mm,
in some kind of meaningful sense to you, and that our audience would be happy to receive.
yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, maybe I'd just like to zoom out a little bit and say, the setup of, two people getting together, connecting virtually, talking about stuff, someone else is listening. Um, for podcasts in the world. At the same time, it can be very tempting to confuse talking about things and thinking about things with understanding them.
Mm,
And whatever knowledge I've gained, whatever knowledge anyone has gained, I think if it's real knowledge, it's based on engaging in the world. It's getting out there, doing stuff, trying it out for yourself.
mm,
Um, and with I think with the specialization of people and of professions, we've sort of accepted this idea that there's a figure of a professor and a wise person and I don't know, a psychologist and an expert in X, Y, or Z, um, and we forget that it's our job to be experts in our own lives, you know, and the things that sorry, I got some. Hola, un momento, eh. Oh, sorry, got some clients coming in.
okay.
They're a little bit early. Um, but when we think about our own lives, really taking seriously the challenge of being experts in our own lives, and if we look at the Kalahari as an example, like it's a non-hierarchical society. It's people are incredibly respectful of one another, regardless of age, of gender. Um, everyone has a place, um, and I think when when we find ourselves getting inspired, when we find ourselves in the face of someone or something that seems to be wiser than us, whether that's a university professor or a foreign culture or whatever it is, to do the work of transforming that into inspiration to reach a similar of wisdom within yourself, rather than just parroting whatever it is the other person said. And I see that a lot in, like, with plant medicine. It's like, oh, the shaman seems to know what he's doing, so I'm just gonna wear the same clothes and sing the same songs, and then I'll be like him. It's like, no, he didn't get there by copying anyone, and you're not going to get there by copying anyone else. Be respectful, be inspired, and find your own path.
Yeah.
So
Well said. All right. Thank you for being here with us. Really, really appreciate it. I'll share your links to things in the show notes, but I know that you do have the persistence race coming up in, is it September?
Yeah. Early September.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people should go check that out if they're curious, and share it too around. Yeah.
I'll send you the link to the persistence event, and also to my personal site. It's more based on therapy and different forms of immersion in nature and things like that. And yeah, obviously, if anyone feels called to reach out, I'm more than happy to talk. So
okay. Thank you so much, man. Bless your
thank you.
heart and your way.
Thank you.